What did some of the greatest Black minds, Black intellectuals, those who dedicated and devoted their lives to the improvement of Black people say about the impact of Islam on Black civilization? Edward Blyden was one of the pioneering fathers of Pan African thought, and he lived in an era where European racial theory presented Black people as dependent, primitive, incapable of producing civilization for themselves. And Blyden wrote a powerful book titled Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race, where he talks about his observations of West African societies. He saw communities with religious institutions, and he wrote that there are numerous Negro Mohammedan communities and states in Africa which are self reliant, productive, independent, and dominant. But Blyden went further than political independence. He believed Islam affected the very psychology of a people. He wrote that Christian travelers with every wish to think otherwise have remarked that the Negro who accepts Mohammedanism acquires at once a sense of dignity of human nature, not commonly found among those who have even been brought to accept Christianity. That is a remarkable observation, a sense of dignity of the human nature. And Blyden was writing during an era that was constantly telling Black people that they were less than human. And for Blyden, he saw that Islam was not simply producing believers, it was producing a people who were self reliant, productive, and conscious of their own dignity. And then there comes the great Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was one of the greatest architects of Black mass mobilization in the history of the world. And he, as someone who founded the United Negro Improvement Association, he was looking to inspire Black people. Although white supremacy, colonialism, slavery had been major setbacks and major defeats, he wanted to embody leadership that could convey to Black people, yes, we suffered this defeat, but we can be resilient, we can persevere, we can come back, and we can be strong, we can improve. And he looked to none other than the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as an example of such leadership. Marcus Garvey wrote that Muhammad suffered many reverses. Muhammad suffered many defeats at certain times, but Muhammad stuck to his faith and ultimately triumphed. And in the very in this very statement, he's indicating the significance that the prophetic biography has to Black people. And he wants oppressed people to know that we cannot build anything lasting if every setback becomes this emotional reaction that destroys us. We cannot build a movement without discipline. We cannot build institutions without sacrifice. And we cannot lead a people if rejection makes you abandon your mission. And then we come to the great Harvard trained sociologist, historian W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois attacked another fundamental lie about Black people, the idea that Africa existed outside of intellectual civilization until Europeans arrived. Du Bois looked at Muslim West Africa and he wrote that Guy, Timbuktu, and Guinea were intellectual centers, and the University of Senghor gathered thousands of students of law, literature, grammar, geography, and surgery. Think about the fields that he names: law, literature, grammar, surgery, geography. These were not simply religious gatherings. He was describing how Islamic civilization cultivated an intellectual life. And Du Bois wrote that from this Africa, a new cultural impulse entered Europe and became the Renaissance. He completely disrupts the story that Black people were taught during colonialism. This colonial narrative that said civilization traveled from Europe into an empty Africa. Du Bois told us to look again. He looked at the manuscripts, the universities, and how these cities throughout Africa, these Islamic influenced civilizations such as Timbuktu, cultivated intellectual life. And then we come to the great Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney, he was a great thinker who devoted himself to proving how European colonialism underdeveloped Africa. And before establishing how European colonialism underdeveloped Africa, He first wanted to talk about the high civilization and intellectual life in pre colonial Africa. And so he wrote that as in other parts of the world, literacy in Africa was connected with religion, so that in the Islamic countries it was Quranic education. And Rodney wrote that this did not just simply stop at basic literacy. He continues that Muslim education was particularly extensive at the primary level, and it was available at the secondary and university levels. Rodney names the institutions, and in Egypt there was Al Azhar University, in Morocco the University of Fez, and in Mali the University of Timbuktu, and that this was all a testimony to the standard of education achieved in Africa before the colonial intrusion. These are some very important observations from Walter Rodney. So Blyden saw dignity and self-reliance. Garvey saw perseverance and resilience. Du Bois saw civilization and scholarship, and Rodney saw education. And then something extraordinary happens. These arguments stop being merely historical. In the life of Malcolm X, one of the greatest black thinkers, political thinkers of the modern era. Malcolm X was once known as Detroit Red. He was a criminal. He was someone who was incarcerated, someone who was deeply involved in hustling the underground economy. He became involved in theft. He became involved in drug distribution. But later in his life, he gets invited to speak at Harvard University. And after getting invited to speak at Harvard, he reflects on his old life. And he writes that awareness came surging up in me, how deeply the religion of Islam had reached into the mud to lift me up, to save me from being what I inevitably would have been, a dead criminal in a grave, or still alive, a flint hard, bitter 37-year-old convict in some penitentiary or insane asylum. And Malcolm X continued. He stated that Allah blessed him to learn about the religion of Islam, which enabled me to lift myself up from the muck and mire of this rotting world. And there I stood, the invited speaker at Harvard. So think about the distance between those two realities: a dead criminal in the grave, a bitter lifelong convict, and now he's a invited speaker at one of the world's most prestigious universities, Harvard University. This is why Malcolm X's story is so powerful. America knew what to do to Malcolm Little. It knew how to arrest him, how to prosecute him, how to give him a prison number, and knew how to create a criminal record. It knew how to make him another casualty of this machine that we call the prison industrial complex, another black man processed through poverty, street economics, criminalization, and incarceration until the world forgot that there had been another possibility inside him. But prison did not become the final meaning of Malcolm X's life. Inside prison, something changed. Malcolm X began reading relentlessly. He began studying vocabulary. And Malcolm X makes it clear that it was Islam that lifted him up. And so he wrote that standing there by that Harvard window, I silently vowed to Allah I would never forget that any wings I wore had been put up by the religion of Islam. And this is the question that we really need to ask ourselves, because there's another black man meeting the criminal legal system before he has the opportunity to encounter his own history. And Malcolm X's life asks us, where is the scholar inside of that young black man who's being channeled in the criminal legal system? Where's the orator inside of him? Where's the leader inside of him? Malcolm X told us the difference between a dead criminal in a grave and the invited speaker at Harvard. Next, we come to the great Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, who he had this charisma, he was athletic, he was fast, he had these natural gifts. But Ali shows us what faith can do when a black man stands before the entire world and refuses to let the world make him bow. So Muhammad Ali, he indicated that the day I met Islam, I found a power within myself that no man could destroy or take away. When Muhammad Ali embraced Islam and he indicated to the world that his religious convictions would not allow him to fight in the Vietnam War, And as a result of that stance that he took, he lost his athletic prime. They took away his boxing license, but Muhammad Ali refused to go down. He showed resilience, and he was not able to box, and he had to make money in other different odd ways during that time period. And he would be paired up against, after he fought legally to get his license back, he would be scheduled to fight against George Foreman. Everyone thought that Muhammad Ali was done and over with. He was past his prime, that he would lose to George Foreman. Muhammad Ali defeated George Foreman, and after he defeated George Foreman, he told the world, "I proved that Allah is God." And when he's giving his post-fight speech, one of a Muslim brother comes up to him. He said, "That's the power of Allah." So the greatest fighter, the greatest boxer that the world has known, he said that it was Islam, that it was through Islam that he found a power within himself. That's what Muhammad Ali told us. Malcolm X told us that it was through Islam that stopped him from becoming a dead criminal in a grave. This is what Islam produces in a people. This is what Islam can do. And Islam, the same Islam that produced Malcolm X, that produced Muhammad Ali, it is still here. It is still vibrant, and it will continue to grow. Black Dawah Network.